Thanks for joining us for another night with the UConn beat writers. Tonight, we're speaking with the UConn beat writers for the women's basketball team. On today's call, we have Alexa Philippou of the Hartford Courant, Doug Bonjour of the Hearst Connecticut Media, Charlotte Carroll of The Athletic, and Daniel Connolly from the UConn blog. To get things started, I asked the beat writers to go over their overall impressions of the team this year.
But I think overall, this team showed some progress. It's tough to really put a cap on it because, there was no ending. So, it just would have been interesting to see what they could have done because they seem like a team that, was peaking and, kind of figured everything out and just obviously, like everyone else, just kind of unfinished business.
Yeah, Alexa, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I had a different perspective. I always watched UConn growing up, but never was this close to really the program. So I think I had a different perspective watching it happen in real time when most people around me and the fans obviously had seen the dominance for so long and we're so used to, blowout wins against the best teams. For me, it wasn't like a, total alarm bells when they didn't, when they lost to Baylor, when they got blown, they were blown out by Oregon. That said, I really do agree with everything Doug said, so I won't circle back on that. But I think one of the more interesting things that I saw and I've been reflecting on is just that this team was really young and has, besides Crystal Dangerfield and Megan Walker could have if she decided to, but they're returning all of their talent next year, and a lot of it, will even still be around the year after that. So I'm personally really intrigued. I know this is looking ahead already, but I'm intrigued to see, the individual growth and also the collective growth that they can make next season. And maybe this year, is the year before the year. We won't know. Hopefully there will be a next season, but that's kind of what I was had stuck in my mind by the time we, had this past season canceled.
And Dan, you've been with the team for a bit now, so I know you bring more of that long tenured beat experience here. What was the season like from your perspective?
I think it's just really weird to judge because everything at UConn is measured by how the season ends. So to the fans, every single season that I've covered, with the exception of 2016, which I was more part-time with that, but every single season that I've covered full-time has ended in utter and total failure because UConn lost in the Final Four. So it's just kind of weird to judge it when there was no finale and there was no postseason to base everything off, because if you look at Gabby and Kia's senior year, I genuinely can't recall a single thing that happened during that regular season because it was just monotonous and they kicked the crap out of everyone. And then the postseason is how everyone remembers that season because they lost to Notre Dame on the Arike Agumbawale shot. So it's just weird trying to judge and grapple with a season that doesn't really involve the postseason at all. And all you really have to work with is kind of the entire regular season. And it feels almost college football-y because you're trying to compare every single team by what happened in the regular season and then a little bit by the conference tournament. But it's hard to declare that there is a clear number one team, despite what Don Staley might want to try and tell everyone. And it's hard to kind of measure where this UConn team should stand in people's memories and what your overall impression of this team should be when there was no measurement at the end of the season of how they stacked up to the rest of the country. It just kind of, the rug got pulled out from everyone. And I guess the overall takeaway is this was just kind of a weird year with an appropriately weird ending, I guess. And I feel weird saying that it was a down year because they had 3 losses, but comparatively, recent UConn teams don't get blown out. So I guess it's the overall thing is it was not as good of a team as some of the other ones that I've seen at UConn, but I was really intrigued into seeing what was going to happen this postseason, just with the way they had improved pretty quickly by the end of the season.
And Charlotte, we'll throw it your way for last thoughts on this one.
Pretty much agree with everything that was said. I mean, coming in, like Alexa, I've seen the dominance from afar, but didn't know what to expect for myself. So it was really cool to see it up close and personal and kind of get to be or begin to kind of embed in the program a little bit, and just get a feel for all of that. So I was looking forward to seeing what they were going to do in the postseason. And the last thing, what I'm grateful for is that Crystal and Meg too, and the other seniors got that championship, and to close out their seasons, just because the way it was ended, that wasn't even guaranteed for everyone else in college basketball. So for me, like, yes, the postseason and end of April or end of March is what's most important to kind of gauge that. But at least there was a little sense of closure. I know that's not the closure UConn fans want, but from maybe looking down the line, that's something they'll be happy about, that they at least got this season. But yeah, I echo everything everyone said.
All right, now you'll get first dibs on this one. Being your first year with the team and getting to see them up close, was there a player or two that really impressed you the most throughout the season?
Oh gosh, I mean, I really liked being able to talk with Crystal. She was kind of the team spokeswoman, and after 4 years in UConn, you could kind of see how that program kind of changes her and kind of like makes her grow as a player and develops. And kind of on the flip side of that, it was fun to talk with Anna and Aubrey and to see how young they are. And that's something I'm looking forward to as the years go on, just to kind of see how they grow. Anna showed so much potential the second half of the season. So I think it'll be really fun to see where she goes and how she develops heading into next season and what role she kind of takes on next year, as a more senior member of the team after those seniors depart. But I really enjoyed watching Crystal play as a senior.
We could throw this down the line to Dan, if you've got any thoughts here.
Yeah, I agree with most of what Charlotte said. Crystal and me were the same class, so I especially enjoyed getting to watch her develop these 4 years and just seeing someone else that's my age. And then I'll let Alexa talk about Anna, but I think the person who I found most interesting this season was Olivia Nelson-Adota, because coming into the season, she was a sophomore. She only started 3 games in the AAC tournament last year when Lou was hurt with her back, and she came into the season and Gino declared her the most important player on the team. And that was a lot of weight to put on her. And she really didn't have a ton of help in the post. There was Kyla Irwin, and she was really the only one that got minutes as a post player. So pretty much the entire weight of the front court was put on Liv. She started the season pretty strong, didn't have a ton of competition, but really exploded with 27.16 rebounds, I believe, against Oklahoma before Christmas break. But then as the new year came, she had a really bad performance against Baylor, didn't even score, kind of sent her on a downfall up until the Oregon game. And then after the Oregon game, Gino said that there was just this transformation in her suddenly, where she went from the worst player, in his words, paraphrasing, that he's had in practice at UConn to one of the best practice players on the team. And of all the players on the team, she was really the one that seemed to be hitting her stride as the season was ending, and then it abruptly ended. So I'm really excited to see where she progresses, because I think she's got all the talent in the world. She's got the talent to be arguably the best center in the country. But going into next season, it's going to be a very similar situation where they really don't have another post player at the moment on the roster that can back her up. The only other player is Piath Gabriel, who as a freshman and by all accounts is going to be a really raw player coming in. So I don't really know how much they're going to even be able to rely on her for a few minutes a game. But next year is going to be a very similar situation with Nelson-Adota, where everything's going to be on her, and I'm really interested to see how she progresses to that point next year.
Alexa, it looks like you've got teed up for this one, so let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to say I'm like a big Anna stan, but I'm a pretty big like firm believer in that she's going to be really good. I always just have this memory of the UVA game. I think it was maybe the 3rd or 4th game of the year when Anna was like, she hadn't made a 3 yet. I think she was like 0 for her first 11. And then she finally hits like that first 3, and Gino like throws up his arms. And that was just like such a turning point for her, because I mean, it did take a little bit too. Like when she got back from winter break, she actually went home to Poland. But like the player we saw in those first few months, I think we were all expecting this, crazy talented, like offensive weapon, played pro over in Poland. So we were all kind of like, okay, what's the deal with Anna here? She's 19, she's experienced, but like she looked like a deer in headlights on the court at times. But then the player that we ended up seeing by the time like January came around, and then, as she got the, the ground underneath her was just like night and day different. And I think she's really talented. Like, obviously we saw that with her shot. She has a big body, so she's a mismatch problem. Her passing was obviously something that she really started to show off as time went on. She had that one game with like 11 assists or something at Tulsa. I don't know, maybe that's wrong, but she has some ridiculous, she has probably the best court vision on the team. And then she'll have that with Paige Becker's coming in next year. So I think it's gonna be interesting if we can get them both on the court at once to see what that'll look like. And her defense improved over time too. So she improved that way. I think she could still stand to kind of improve her handle and just like, going off the bounce. But I think she has a ton of potential. I think she, like, not just at UConn, but like professionally. Obviously she did play professionally before this, or in that weird, professional that was still not an NCAA issue for her to come to UConn. And the other thing I really kind of enjoyed as kind of time went on, we got to see more of her personality. And, she had some fun, just like funny moments where you could tell she was a little not as, she didn't have as much of a filter as maybe the players are usually kind of told to have. So that was fun. And I'm excited to see that progress, by the time maybe she's a senior, and God knows what she'll say. But yeah, she was just really interesting to watch, just from start to finish.
And Doug, anyone that wasn't mentioned on your end that impressed you this year?
Well, I was going to kind of branch off what Charlotte said, and just Crystal, just because she was a senior and, the senior. And I just remember back to the end of her junior year and the Notre Dame loss, and in the locker room, and she stopped in the corner and kind of reflective and just kind of reliving the mistakes that she made in her head. And you go into this season and she's going to be, as Charlotte said, the spokesperson of the team, and a lot was on her shoulders. And performance wise, she really kind of lived up to that. I mean, you go back to the losses, and she was really the, while Megan Walker was invisible at times, Crystal stepped up. South Carolina, I think she had 28 of their however many points, and Baylor she played well, and Oregon she was their leading scorer. So just going in, it was interesting to see what she was going to be able to do, being that number one player and kind of having all that pressure on her. And she really lived up to that, which is, again, is unfortunate that they had the ending that they did have, and she wasn't able to write the ending that she wanted. So she was the one for me.
Yeah, I know you guys have all brought up some of these bigger losses this year, which is a rare thing at UConn, for them to be in games where they're pretty much getting run off the court at times. What do you think was the difference maker this year that had them struggle against some of those top level teams in college basketball this year? And Doug, why don't you start? We'll work back down the line.
I mean, there wasn't really one common thread. I think you can dissect each loss a little different. I mean, South Carolina, they just didn't score. They couldn't shoot. They had 4 points in the first quarter. Oregon, they got screened to death, pick and roll to death, whatever you want. I mean, Oregon was kind of as Rebecca Lobo said, a team of destiny too. And then Baylor, they were in it. They're at home, and they just didn't execute down the stretch. I mean, Nelson Adota, she didn't play well, and they didn't really have Walker, so she didn't score much, and so they were inexperienced at times. Again, we saw Anna step up down the stretch. Aubrey too, she played well in a few games, but she obviously next year you would expect more out of her. So I think each loss you kind of have to look at it differently, and and then again those three teams had separated themselves so much from the pack. I mean, what that would have meant for March, we'll never know. But in terms of that, I mean, that's kind of how you have to look at it, or at least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, Alexa, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I basically can't really add a ton to what Doug's assessment was, but maybe I'll focus a little bit more on like how those other three teams did separate themselves from the pack. I mean, they all did in different ways too. Like Oregon obviously had that combination of, they had basically three of the best players in the country, 3 top 10. Right, Ruthie went top 10 too. Yeah, so 3 top 10 WNBA draft picks, 1, 2 with Sabrina and Satu. Sabrina being a generational player. Baylor just super experienced and, had that depth in the front court that UConn really couldn't play up against. And, they were coming off a national title too. Like they are the defending champions. So that's obviously, that was something, even though they had picked up that second loss right at the end of their regular season, they were going to be a threat down the line too. South Carolina, kind of opposite end of the spectrum from Oregon with just 3 freshman starters that have really such a bright future. And there are 2 senior leaders too, who ended up also getting, being first round draft picks. So, they just really did distinguish themselves as the 3 best teams in the country. And then you had that kind of fight for the 4th, maybe between Maryland and Louisville. And I found it really interesting just to kind of witness the national conversation, even at the local level too, of, it was the first time in so long that UConn just wasn't clearly one of those elite teams. I think that's, like Gina I think he said as much during the season, or, at least that they weren't at the time, like maybe they still could have proven themselves in the tournament. We'll never know. But, they were just not one of those elite teams that year. And they were, they did have the youth working against them and the, relative inexperience. And it seemed like they had a fire kind of, kicked under them towards the end of the season for when they actually started to get their, get their stuff together. But we don't even know what would have happened in the tournament. Maybe it would have ended up being those 3 teams as easy Final Four bids. And we don't know if UConn could have like slid in at some point, but I think it was a good season for women's basketball just as a whole, though, that, there were other teams besides UConn that were really prominent in the national conversation. I think in general, that's like a net positive.
We'll switch up the question now for the other half of the panel. Looking back through this season, in terms of the development, was there a player or two of the younger players that really impressed you in terms of their development from the start of the season to where things ended?
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay. I think the easy one to point to is obviously Anna, because as Gino termed it, she started 0 for America from 3. And it really took her a while this season to kind of get settled in and find her groove. But once she did down the stretch, she was a really, really dangerous player on offense where as Alexa mentioned earlier, even when she wasn't shooting the ball super well, she was racking up assists. She was getting rebounds. She was having some games like at ECU where she hit 8 threes and just went off like that. So that end of the season player, I think, is kind of what we expected from the beginning of the year. And it seemed like the situation that she landed in at UConn, she grew up a big Diana Taurasi fan, so really liked UConn. It seemed like maybe the moment was a little too big for her earlier in the season, and she just kind of struggled to adjust to it initially, but then once she got settled in, she was really, really fun to watch. So I think she was the player that throughout the course of the year probably made the most progress.
I'm
Carly, how
gonna
about
go off your comments from earlier about Olivia Nelson-Ododa as well, just because, I mean, not only Anna, I think, is one of the biggest developmental achievements of the season, but ONO, just because of how she just became such a consistent player for UConn towards the end of the season, and as they were kind of after that Oregon game that Gino made that comment. So just kind of adding that one on.
From just looking back in an overall perspective, what the UConn women's basketball team was able to do against American athletic competition what was remarkable, albeit even if it wasn't at previous levels of competition. From your standpoint, and we could just go quickly down the line here, how impressed were you with that undefeated record throughout the past 7 years of AAC play?
It's crazy. I mean, I didn't watch all 7 years, but just watching this season, there was some tight, you could see, and that was kind of the conversation, is when those games were a little closer this season, how much of a shock it was that it was those losses or those wins were, what was it? I think it was 2 single-digit wins this season, which was crazy for the first time ever. So just that level of pure dominance is absolutely maddening and a really cool thing to witness. And I'm really glad I got to cover the end of it. I'll be just a little short portion of it, but crazy.
Dan.
Yeah. I mean, I think it ended up being, I don't remember the exact number, 2 or 3 total single digit wins. And
It was
really
2.
2 of those weren't.
It was 2.
2? Okay. So there really weren't any close games throughout the entire 7 years, except the Tulane game in 2017, which they probably should have lost. It was coming off the 100 wins against Oregon, or against South Carolina, sorry. I think they went to the WNBA or the NBA All-Star game the night before. Kia Nurse was hurt, so she was missing for that one. That was really the only game where, as the game was counting down, there was a legitimate chance that they were going to lose that game. I mean, a couple different bounces one way or another. I think Tulane had a chance to tie it at the end of the game with a shot. They legitimately could have lost that game, but for every single other one, the entire 7 years, there were some games that were maybe still close early in the fourth quarter that UConn eventually put away. Maybe some games where UConn let off the gas in the end and the other team made the margin of victory not super wide. But there really is only one game in, what is it, 138?
139.
39, I think.
139 that you can point to and say that they could have lost this game. I think it's just incredible how every single night they showed up and they did what they had to do in order to get a win. Even if not every single one was pretty, they still pulled off a win every single time.
Yeah, Alexa, we'll throw this one all the way down the line here.
Yeah, I mean, I would just basically say the same thing. I think, I remember saying on Twitter after the AAC tournament championship game, like there was a few people who were just completely poo-pooing like 139-0 record in AAC play. And like, yes, the AAC is not a great conference and the talent disparity is big, but I think it still takes a lot. I think it's a testament to the coaching staff and the preparation, the focus that they instill in the players that like year after year, game after game, you're mentally in the moment and, mentally prepared and physically prepared to go in and like play, maybe not always your best, because obviously it didn't always look like it was pure dominance, but, to actually go in and like achieve a win. I don't think that should be like understated. I think that's really difficult to do. There's a reason probably why more teams don't do that, but it's just because everything that UConn does is like graded on this curve that maybe others don't really appreciate that. And I do think, I'm looking it up now, that they're like the average margin of victory ended up being like 40 points throughout their 7 years, which is just like, even if you take into account that it was like relatively closer this year, like there was like a 12-point victory and like, I don't know, 16.1 maybe that week of like Memphis and UCF, it's still like, it just kind of defies comprehension. So I think it's still very impressive regardless of the quality of the conference.
Yeah, Doug, anything to add here?
Yeah, no, I just thought, good point by Alexa. I mean, how many times do you see on the women's level and even more on the men's level, just these blue bloods going up against schools that they should crush and they lose and everyone's shocked, but UConn, 7 years, they never did that. It's just, again, a testament to the coaching staff. And, I don't care what league it is. I mean, you go undefeated over the course of 7 years. That's amazing. It's tough really to put it into words. And, they not just, beat teams, they clobbered most teams. We're not going to see it in the Big East. They'll lose the game within the next 7 years in the Big East. I'll put my money on that. So
you heard it here first.
So, Charlotte, we could start with you on this one. As we start to look ahead to next year, how surprised were you with the early departure from Megan Walker, and what impact do you think that has on next year's team?
It was pretty, shocking to me because I was expecting her to come back and get that extra year of development, which would benefit her for the draft and for the W. And then also just to come back and be that senior leader that UConn will kind of need because they won't have that with a true senior on the roster. So for me, it was surprising. I think she made the best move for her, obviously, and I'm very happy to see where she landed. And she's ecstatic and she's excited, which is really great to see that and to see it work out. But from the impact it has next year, I think it will be tough because you won't have that player who's been in the program that long. Just from that leadership perspective. But then when you kind of look at the players coming in and the players returning, we kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, just another year of perhaps kind of growing into the year before the year as a possibility in my eyes of kind of what will happen, especially when we haven't brought up Paige, but Paige coming in really kind of, I don't know if it upsets the dynamic or just like this new focus, this highly touted recruit is coming in who's going to be I think it's fair to say all eyes on Paige next season. So they'll have that kind of to counter what Megan would have brought when the two of them could have kind of worked more closely and kind of balanced together. So it will be interesting, but very happy for her and very excited that she ended up where she did. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Dan, anything on this one?
Yeah, I definitely didn't expect her to leave. I think also kind of got thrown off by the fact that there was no postseason where we didn't really get a chance to ask her just because we weren't expecting the season to end when it did. So it was definitely surprising. I didn't see it coming. I'm honestly not too down on them next year with losing her. No disrespect to her as a player, but I just think they'll be fine without her. It's just part of a year earlier, but it's just part of the normal cycles with college basketball. I think they have the players that can replace her because really with Megan, her scoring is the big thing that you need to replace. And I think the steps that Kristen Williams, Anna Makarat, Aubrey Griffin, and then what Paige is going to bring is going to make that they're going to be able to divide up what they lost from her in scoring. And I really don't think it'll be a huge loss. I think they'll be able to deal with it. They've had much more difficult departures, especially with Nafisa Collier, Kia Nurse, and Gabby Williams. I think those ones are a lot harder to swallow, but I think this team's pretty built to be able to carry on.
Alexa, I'm going to kind of
You make a really good
go ahead, Charlotte.
Oh, so I just wanted to say you make a really good point about the divided scoring and how the workload kind of will be divided next season. That's all. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Alexa,
chime in.
Go for it, Doug.
Carl Adamek of the Manchester Inquirer and myself, we asked her in, I think it was January, and when her name first started floating on mock drafts and whatnot. And the only interesting thing at that point was that she didn't say no. She was just kind of, I'm happy where I am. I'm, all those usual lines. So that said, I was still surprised, especially because the NCAA tournament wasn't played, and you figure, players should, that would be a better chance to showcase herself. And, she wasn't, at her best in those big games. So that said, you can never be surprised that at a player chasing her dreams. And obviously it worked out for her too. She landed in a good spot and was a top 10 pick. And, she said it kind of validated her decision. So,
Alexa, I don't know if you have anything else to add on this, but I kind of wanted to flip it a little bit too. And I know, Charlotte, you talked about Paige coming in and her really being all eyes on her. Alexa, she seems like someone who's ready to take on that spotlight. From what you've been able to learn about her, how ready do you think she is to kind of come in as probably one of the most heralded freshmen that UConn's had in quite some time to, and expected to perform right away at a high level?
Yeah, so I've only spoken with her once because, I kind of just came on the beat, but a lot of what I kind of have heard about her, like a lot of my impressions on her, kind of been relayed to me from my colleague, Mike Anthony, who actually spent time in Minnesota with her and wrote a column or two off of it. Um, and it's actually, too, informed by what we've heard Gino say, and I'm sure like the rest of the panelists could speak to this as well. But I think she's, there's no question how talented she is, and her court vision is, I think there's like this quote I remember reading about her where it's like kind of basically like it's a gift from God almost. Like it just doesn't even make sense all the time how she sees these people on the court, not to mention her scoring ability and just her quickness and agility on the court. But, one of the things that has stuck out to me from just, my less than a year speaking to Gino is he said the only freshman ever come in, to the program and be already the best team, the best player in the team, best player in America was Maya Moore. Diana Taurasi and Stewie and, everyone in between, like they all had their ups and downs as a freshman. Like it wasn't easy to them. Like they had to learn what it took to make that jump from high school to the college level. And so I'm sure, the same is probably going to be true for Paige. I just hope that, given how much hype there is around her, that people keep that in mind, that if she stumbles a little bit at the beginning, for whatever reason, then, it's not necessarily like a sign that, she's not the number one recruit. Gino screwed up. She's doomed. Like, it's not necessarily like a reason to press the panic button by any means. I think she's also extremely committed to getting better in the program, and she wants to be coached, and she wants to be coached hard. So she will, assuming that remains true, she'll be able to come out on the better end of all of it. So I'm not exactly, I think, we could see maybe some ups and downs potentially at the beginning of her career. Whether or not she emerges as, like a star that, I know Gino said that one point of the season, like we'll be, I'll say a year from now that she's the reason we won a national championship. That might, I don't know, that kind of changes maybe with Megan gone, I think. But, maybe she still does end up doing that. I think she has the potential to do it, but I just think it's important to kind of keep in mind that this girl's human. She's like 18 years old. She's, we'll just have to see how she develops. But I think certainly that fans should be very excited for her to come. And as well as the rest of the recruits who are also really promising.
Charlotte, I know you brought her up originally, so you have anything else to add on Paige here?
No, I think Alexa made a really good point because that's been talked about, and Gino was talking about it with Stewie, actually, Brown Stewart, in an Insta Live. Was it last week already? The days are blurring. But about just the amount of pressure that's on a kid who comes in that has such eyes on her. And so Stewie was a really good person to talk to about that. And so I think that is just, like Alexa said, just keeping that in mind of, like, you're not going to be perfect probably that first year. And that first time she kind of either screws up in practice, and the first time kind of Gino yells at her. I think she's ready for it. But also like that first time in a game and that first mistake there will be interesting to kind of see how she reacts and how she builds herself off of that. But I think she'll be okay. I mean, she knows really more than ever, I think. I mean, I don't know much about Stewart's recruiting process, but just how social and how like a social presence and how, I guess, digitally presenced Paige is. I think she really knows what she's getting into. So.
Dan, I'll throw to you here. I know we talked a lot about Paige just now, but who are some of the other newcomers coming into next year, that people should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, they actually have a really interesting freshman class because obviously Paige is the headliner, but it's a 5-player class, which for UConn is pretty big. They don't usually have classes that are that large. There's no real standout player behind Paige, but there's a lot of really talented and people that they're high on. They've got another European coming in, Nika Mule from Croatia. She's a point guard. She's very pass first. He told Maria Marino on the coaches show that Nika told him this quote where when she likes assisting better than scoring, because when you give it an assist, 2 people are happy, whereas when you score, 1 person's happy. So I think that says a lot about who she is. It's just with her, I think it might be just a matter of how she translates to the American game. then you've got Mir McLean, who seems to have a lot of similarities to someone like Gabby Williams, but also Aubrey Griffin, where she's super, super talented and athletic, but maybe the basketball skills aren't fully developed yet. So it might take some time for her to develop in that regard, but there still may be a way for her to make an impact. And then kind of similarly with Aaliyah Edwards, where she's Canadian, she's 6'3", but she's super athletic. Gino's very high on her. She played for Kia Nurse's AAU team, which is an interesting connection. And similar with Mir, it's a little uncertain with how much of an offensive game and how refined she's going to be coming into UConn, but it seems like there's enough there where she's going to be able to at least make an impact. And then you've got Piath Gabriel, a 6'5" center out of New Hampshire, sister of Wenyan Gabriel, but from most accounts, she's a pretty raw player, high work rate, high energy. Gino seems to like her as a prospect, but he also seemed to admit on SNY that she is going to be a project, and I don't know how much they can really count on her this first season, but it will be interesting to see whenever we get to see the team play for the first time, just kind of what level she's at and what they're going to be working with. So I really think it's going to be an interesting class to watch, and it's a really important class because this is the foundation for the next era of UConn basketball. Every class above them on the program has 2 or less players in it. So this really is super important that this one pans out for UConn.
Doug, anything else to add on any of the newcomers for next year?
She's not in high school there, but Avina Westbrook, Tennessee transfer. I mean, she sat out all this year. Underwent knee surgery last summer, I believe, and again in January. So she's been working out. I think she's been the only player still on campus, partly because of that. But that's a player who you would expect next year, assuming she's healthy, just to plug in, and you would hope to. It's a lot to ask her to replicate what Crystal did, but you would expect her to come in and average double digits and be a playmaker like she was at Tennessee. So obviously a lot of weight's going to be on her shoulders.
So I want to wrap this way, and Doug, we'll start with you. Work our way back down the line. What's your way early prediction? And it could be on anything UConn women's basketball related for next year.
Is there going to be a season? I don't know. But, no. Wow. I mean, I would expect. Okay, I'll just go out on a limb. They'll be back in the Final Four. That's my super, super, super early prediction. I mean, they should be a preseason top 5 team. Losing Megan, yes, it hurts. Maybe it shifts down from 2 to 3, but still, there's a lot of talent left over. Gino has a way of figuring this out. You don't go the program hasn't been, you don't go this long and win for this long without knowing what you're doing. So, there'll be a Final Four team. That's my crazy, super early prediction.
And that's what we're going for with these. Have some fun with them. Alexa?
Oh God, this is like my least favorite thing to do. Like literally you can't even get me to make like a normal prediction. Like I wouldn't even predict where like Crystal and Megan went like last week in the draft. Okay, this is like probably not gonna be that satisfactory, but I think that maybe my prediction is gonna be Aaliyah Edwards emerges as like a pretty significant, I don't know if I say a pretty significant piece, but like she starts to really emerge. Like my understanding of her was that she was a little bit like further ahead than like, maybe like not as like, as overhyped as Paige or as hyped as Paige, but that she was like super promising. Like the way that I heard Gino talk about her, he basically, just to refer to the Maria Marino show that Daniel did, he said like when he saw Aaliyah play for the first time, he was like, I need to get that girl. Like she's coming to UConn. So he usually is like right about most of those things. So I think like we could see a lot from her as a freshman. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but she does provide a little height. Like another, good prospect like that can, be on the perimeter and whatnot. So I don't know if that's really satisfactory. That's going to be mine, and I'm going to stick to it.
Go for it. We'll take it. Dan, how about you?
All right. I'll go hot here. I don't think they lose a game before the postseason starts. I'm looking at their non-conference.
Get
out of here.
I'm looking at their schedule next year, and no one on the non-conference schedule. Yeah. The opponents that they have. So I'll list them off. On the road, they're going to play, and you have to remember that 3 of these are going to get cut or not happen because they're moving to the Big East. But as they have now, the road is at Baylor, Cal, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and UVA. At home, they're scheduled to play Dayton, Little Rock, Maryland, South Carolina, and Texas. And then Louisville is supposedly going to maybe be a neutral site game. I just don't really see anyone that stands out from that pack aside from South Carolina, but that's going to be a home game. I also never think South Carolina is ever really that good. Other than that, Baylor's losing Lauren Cox. Tennessee, I don't really think is going to be anything special. Notre Dame, I think, is probably done as a program as we know it. And Texas, I think, could take a pretty big jump with Vic Schaefer with the talent they have. And then Louisville's always a good team, but I don't know. No one really stands out for me on that. So I'll just drop a really hot take there.
See, Alexa, he took your modest prediction there, and he just raised it 10 levels. So, Charlotte, I don't know if you could top that one there, but
I'm gonna go way bottom of that because I've got nothing as hot as that. I don't know. I think they're gonna struggle at first in the beginning of the season, kind of maybe similar to this season. It won't result in losses per se, but I do think there's gonna be that time with you have 5 new recruits coming in. You've got not like a senior leader. So I think there will be some adjustment period, and it'll be good to have a year of with Anna and Aubrey, who will come in more improved, but especially with whatever's happening with the pandemic, I can guarantee that they won't get into the gym on time. I don't know anything about what's going to happen, but it just seems the way things are happening, who knows when they're all going to get to be together as a team for the first time. So you have to take into account that. So I think, and that's not just a UConn problem, but I do think there'll be some, kinks to work out, whatever you want to call it. But I think they'll be fine. I don't want to make Final Four predictions. I have no whatsoever insight into that or anything crazy, but I think they'll be good. And as whoever touched on that, Gino knows how to work with this stuff. He knows how to put together a program. So kind of similar to maybe this year.
Dan, and who knows? Maybe if there isn't a season, you'll hold out with that prediction of no losses before the postseason. But
I guarantee you that Gino, without knowing anything that's going on, just suddenly just burst out laughing for no reason. He had just this sense that something ridiculous was said by the UConn players.
In fairness, I didn't even the possibility of not having any off season didn't occur to me, but we're just gonna roll with it.
That's why they're hot takes.
Like Charlotte said, fair playing field. Everyone, won't have their off season, so take that into account. But guys, really appreciate the time tonight. This is a lot of fun, and we'll have to regroup as we get ready for the start of the season. But thanks again for joining me, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.